I am Ella, a woman shaped by the harshness of life. I grew up in a small, remote village far to the north, where winters were long and cruel and the snow seemed endless. My family had little, and as the eldest daughter, I always felt the weight of responsibility. Life was simple, and there was no room for dreams beyond survival. Yet I couldn't help but dream of something more. It was in this cold and isolated place that I first saw him, James. He came from the wealthiest family in the region, and his presence in the village was like a breath of fresh air. I remember the first time he smiled at me, the way my heart skipped a beat. He was everything I wasn't, charming, confident, and destined for a life far beyond my own. His world was one of opportunity, while mine was one of struggle. Despite our differences, we became friends. The more time we spent together, the more my feelings for him grew. I never told him how I felt. How could I? He was out of my reach, part of a world that would never include me. But I couldn't stop my heart from falling in love with him, even if I knew deep down that it was a hopeless, one-sided love. I tried to keep my feelings hidden, even from myself, but one day James made a choice that shattered everything between us. He left me. He proposed to Clara, a woman of his own world, someone who matched his status and future. It was in that moment that I realized I had been nothing more than a passing dream to him. He had never truly seen me the way I had seen him. The pain of his rejection was unbearable. I thought I would never recover from it, that the pieces of my heart would never fit together again. But life, as it often does, pushed me forward. I eventually married Henry, a man from my community who had always loved me. He wasn't James, and I didn't feel the same passion for him, but he was steady, dependable, and for the first time in my life, I felt secure. When I think back to those days when James and I were young, I can still feel the warmth of his smile, the way our conversations would stretch into the night, full of dreams and shared secrets. In those moments we were equals, two souls connected by something deeper than just friendship. For me, it felt like the beginning of something beautiful, something destined to last. But James was always aware of the distance between us. While I saw him as my future, he knew the social lines that separated us too well. He never said it, but I could feel it, the way he pulled away when things got too close. The way he started to keep his distance as if afraid of what our connection might mean. And when he announced his engagement to Clara, it was as though the world had crumbled beneath me. I couldn't understand it. How could he leave me for her? How could he choose a life without me? The pain was so deep that I couldn't think straight. I wanted to scream, to ask him why, but I knew the answer even before I asked. He chose Clara because she belonged to his world, the world that I would never be part of. I tried to convince myself that it was better this way, that he had made the right choice for himself, but my heart wouldn't listen. It ached with the thought of never being in his life again. I spent many nights crying in the darkness, trying to erase the memory of him, but it was impossible. Even when I tried to move on, James lingered in my heart, a ghost I couldn't shake. His memory was a constant weight, and no matter what I did, I couldn't stop loving him. Years passed, and I tried to build a life with Henry. I thought I had moved on, that I had buried the past deep enough, but then James returned. I didn't expect it. How could I? The man I had once loved, the one who had broken my heart, suddenly reappeared in my life as if nothing had ever happened. The first time I saw him again, my heart nearly stopped. He was different. Older, more confident, more successful. His wealth had grown, and with it his power. But when he looked at me, I could see the same man I had once known, the same eyes filled with regret. He hadn't forgotten me, and I hadn't forgotten him either. I didn't know what to say to him. The years had passed and the pain had faded into something else. Something that didn't feel like love anymore, but wasn't entirely hatred either. James tried to explain himself, tried to tell me that he regretted his decision, that he had always cared for me, but how could I believe him after everything that had happened? After the way he had turned away from me, could I really trust him again? It wasn't just the past that made me hesitant, it was my life now. I had Henry, a man who had always been there for me, a man who had never made me question his love. Could I throw that away for the man who had once rejected me? Could I risk my heart again? As James made his intentions clear, my life became a battleground between the man I had once loved and the man who had been my rock. James was relentless in his pursuit, constantly reminding me of the love we had shared, of the moments we had lost. His presence stirred something in me that I thought had died. I remembered the way he had made me feel, alive, special, as if anything was possible. But Henry was different. He had been there for me when I was at my lowest, when I needed someone to hold me together. He loved me with a steady, unwavering love, and that was something I couldn't ignore. Henry wasn't flashy or charming like James. He was simply there, reliable and strong. The tension between James and Henry became unbearable. I could see the pain in Henry's eyes whenever James was around, and I knew that this wasn't just about me. It was about the two men who had become intertwined in my life, neither one willing to let go. I didn't know how much longer I could keep up the charade, pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I wanted to make a decision to choose one of them and move on, but I couldn't. Part of me still loved James, but I knew that part of me was also in love with Henry. The choice was impossible, and every time I thought I had figured it out, something would happen to remind me of the pain I had felt. The day came when I could no longer avoid the decision. I had to choose. James had given me his heart, but he had also shattered it. He had abandoned me once, and though he begged for a second chance, I couldn't forget the pain he had caused me. Could I forgive him? Could I go back to the man who had left me for someone else? And then there was Henry. He had always been there for me, never asking for more than I could give. He loved me in a way that felt real, steady, and true. But did I love him enough to let go of the past, of James? In the end, I chose Henry. It wasn't because he was perfect, but because he was the man who had stood by me through everything. He was the one who had proven that love could be steady and constant, even in the face of all the chaos. James, with all his regrets, walked away. And though part of me would always wonder what could have been, I knew that I had made the right choice. Life was about moving forward, and with Henry by my side, I was ready to build the future I had always dreamed of.